January 10th meeting of the Transportation Advisory Committee is called to order. That's 7:01 p.m. And let's see, the first order of business is the minutes, correct, Aaron?
Oh, we have to do a roll call vote
Oh,
first.
the roll call. Yep, that's right. Video Zoom thing. Okay, so how many have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who are we missing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Kathleen was missing. Okay. We'll wait another minute or two. She's usually on time. I guess we'll start the roll call and then we'll call her I'll call on her when she comes in. So let's see if you could just state your names, members of the committee. Michelle.
Michelle Cardinal, present.
Norman.
Norman Abbott, present.
Laura.
Laura Davis, present.
Dan. But you're muted, Dan. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Dan Schrager, present.
And Phil.
Bill Posner, here.
Okay. All right, fine. And then, so the first order of business is acceptance of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look at them? Has anyone found any things that need correcting? If no correction, yes, Michelle?
I had a chance to look. In reviewing them, I'm not sure in the meeting we captured next steps on the mission and values. I think we discussed that it was that they were important, but I don't think we captured sort of how we would maybe.
Yeah, I don't think we or I was very clear on that. It was just, there was something that we were going to need to do pretty soon. So I think that pretty much reflects what happened.
Yeah, exactly. It reflects what happened. Do we want to, I mean, maybe for a
no,
future
we're going to deal with it tonight. That's one of the first things up tonight. So.
Oh, okay, I missed that. Okay, great.
So we'll deal with that then. Anything else? Anyone? Okay, I'll take a motion to accept the minutes. Someone?
Motion to
I'll move.
accept or move. Seconded.
Norman, a second. Okay, and seconded by Dan. Roll call, Michelle.
I was just looking at my notes. Yes, that's fine. We can move on.
Okay, Norman,
Yep.
Laura,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
Okay, and we're still waiting on Kathleen. That's okay. So let's see here, where were we on that? So what I want to do next, I've been nervous today thinking about this, and the reason is that we have a lot to do over the rest of this month. By the end of the month, the select board will be looking to see if we have any inputs for them as they consider what to do with the ARPA money, the $2.5 million that they got from the government. And you know, it would be nice to have plenty of time to look at everything and figure it out in great detail, but I think we're going to have to go through an expedited planning process here so that we can feel we've done a decent job of considering what might be important and why. So with that, if you could let me take control. Now, how do I do that? Screen share.
If you're not able, hold on 1 second.
I got it, I think. Hold, shift to select multiple windows. Okay, share. I got to set system preferences to allow that. Hold on. There's that. Just a minute, folks. Hey, oh, there we go. Having a problem. Some reason I don't understand. I'm being locked out of my system preferences here.
Nick, if it's the last one that you shared with me, I can share my screen.
Yeah, that was the one I sent back this afternoon.
I think that's
Yeah,
what I,
that'll, yeah. It was yours with more added to it. Okay. Right, that's it. Okay, so as I said, this would be like a phase one planning process. Next slide. So values is just the thing to talk about. I talked about that before because when we worked on the long range plan, it was clear that a lot of the issues that things we were thinking about related to transportation and mobility had to do with, were a reflection of the values of the town. But as I look through the long range plan, the Envision Concord again, I realized that there were other things stated in other sections of the plan that I really couldn't characterize as values, but more like objectives. And it seemed to me that when you think about the values, they're there to help you figure out what your objectives should be. So I've just decided to call this section objectives instead. And it is reflective values. What does the town want to achieve? And then we'll get into talking about the current situation, metrics and analysis. We're not going to go into this very much tonight because it's a complicated topic and I just don't want to go down into that too deeply. Then we're going to look, Erin has been looking at current projects that are underway, on hold, whatever state they're in the town. So we're going to look at that. And then finally, we're going to talk a bit about identifying a preliminary set of high priority projects and needs. Basically, we're going to talk about the criteria for that tonight rather than actually doing it. So next slide, Erin. Okay, so this is what I took away from sections of the long range plan. One that was part of the transportation section, the first two, improve mobility for those facing economic challenges, people with lower income, workers who may work in town, they may not be highly paid, getting to Concord is expensive for them. You know, what can we do to help with that? Issues of that sort. Then improve mobility for those unwilling or unable to drive, young people, elderly, people who are disabled, visitors to town who may come on a bicycle or, you know, come on a train and want to get around town. What do we provide for them? And value of sustainability. Anything we do needs to be financially sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and from a health standpoint, public health sustainable. The preservation of historic and the scenic nature of Concord. You know, we want to do these good things, but, you know, we want to do it with an understanding of what this town is, what it's been, what it values in this regard of its history and the way it's attempted to preserve nature. And economic vitality is another objective, to support local businesses, farms, village centers, historic and cultural organizations. And if you think about it, they are very much affected by the transportation as it is and what they may see as deficiencies and shortcomings. And finally, and this one was clearly stated, and I'm not sure it's an objective, but having a complete streets philosophy to the roads of Concord. And this is sort of a values thing. It's an issue of accessibility. It's an issue of transforming the roads from something where cars rain and anyone attempting to cross the road is in danger to a more equitable use of the roads. So I see that. Now, does anyone else found anything else in the long range plan or something that may have even been missing from the plan that they think is an important objective we should be looking at or a value? Anyone on the committee?
I feel like this feels really comprehensive to me, but I think there was one on parking, which is, I guess I was reading that as different from mobility.
Yes, it's going to come up on another slide in the next
okay.
one, I think.
Right. I can hold.
And I'll explain why it's on the next slide then. Anyone else? Anything missing? And we can come back if you realize tomorrow.
No, I do have something I wanted to, this is not missing, but just in terms of a reframing of one thing. Emissions and climate isn't specifically called out except for one line that says, resulting in lower carbon emissions. Transportation policies that result in lower carbon emissions. But I just wanted to call out sort of one of the key parts of Sustainable Concord, which I know was one of the prep materials for tonight, calls out mobility and has a very succinct way of putting it, which is that everyone in the town of Concord has access to zero carbon transportation options to commute and get around Concord. So it's just a sort of a reframing of the sustainability, which can be so broad as to be unuseful. So it's just sort of another way of putting that in there.
Go ahead. Aaron's going to add that, something like that in. Go ahead. Say it again, Laura.
Everyone, this is a direct quote from Sustainable Concord. Everyone has access to zero carbon transportation options to commute and get around Concord.
Transportation options to move around Concord.
To commute and get around Concord. So they specifically called out commuting as well as just general mobility.
Good. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, the current situation. Now here, these are ones that were obvious to me. I am sure there's no end of characterizations we could come up with for the current situation. And we're happy to add on anything that's important that you think is missing. And as I said, what we do today isn't going to be frozen in concrete. We can come back, between meetings even, you can send me stuff, send me and Aaron things, and, we can put them tentatively in and talk about them at a following meeting. So the ones this current situation, we have this heavy reliance on car ownership and individual car use for transportation. This has serious consequences environmentally. A lack of buses or shared use vehicles within the town for the public. Sidewalks in village centers and near the schools, but not many elsewhere. Demand for more parking. This is where that one comes in, which is there is a demand and there's a perception that there's a problem. I'm certainly not going to say that more parking is an objective. So that's why it's here. Shuttles operated by organizations for private and restricted populations. So for instance, there are all those school buses that can only be used by the schools. There are vans owned by Council on Aging that can only be used for their people that participate in those programs. There are private shuttles used by various organizations that pass through Concord. So, there's a lot, it's frightening and sad. There's all of this capacity around and it isn't necessarily used at all times and the public does not have access to it. And there's a lack of service for visitors arriving by rail. This could be commuters who, we have the first mile, last mile problem. They may live in Boston and work in Concord, and once they get off at the station, what do? So I'll throw this one open too. So any others that you want to add here in terms of the current transportation situation that could be called out?
I think we're missing the highlighting of the positives of the access to two separate commuter rail stations. Like you touch on the rail part there,
Right,
but
good.
to have two rail stations within Concord, in sort of two economic centers, I think overlooking that sort of the possibility there would be doing us a disservice.
Good, that's excellent. Thank you. Anyone else?
Go ahead, Michelle.
Michelle?
I should use my raise hand tool. I was just gonna say, I liked the way that you characterized it. That was my takeaway. Nick, was similar after reading the document, was there's what we have, there's what we lack, and then there's what we have, but people don't, maybe people don't know about. That seemed like a thread sort of throughout, and my career has been in marketing, getting people to know about things. I think there's something really, I think there's a lot of potential in there. And as I know, it sounds like we'll talk about this in a minute, but as we think about how we prioritize certain initiatives, there could be some easier, low hanging fruit that's just getting people to be aware of some of the things that exist already, and versus the new things that could, take some time to put in place. So, it felt like they sort of fall into those two buckets a little bit.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing you're pointing out implicit in what you're saying, which is that there may be some things that are easy to do that have some good impact, but they don't have, huge impact. And it may well be worth doing those ahead of some other things that have huge impact, but we can't do them very quickly. So we're going to have to figure out how to balance that. And that'll come up in the last slide where we talk about, criteria for making decisions.
So,
anything else?
jump in? So a couple of things. I'm not sure it belongs here, but I'll just throw it out. One is that there's a perception that there is excess congestion in the town centers. And that's something that comes up in the Envision Concord report. And the other thing is a perception that due to Waze and Google Maps, that traffic has become a problem on secondary and tertiary roads throughout the town. So I'm not sure that that fits exactly, but it is brought up in the report.
I'll say the first one again.
It's the perception that there's too much congestion in the town.
Congestion. Okay, yes. The Envision Concord was written before the pandemic, and there were huge backups. If you approached Barrett's Mill Road on Lowell Road after 3 o'clock, I mean, it was literally backed up to Liberty Street.
Right, and that's true on Lexington Road coming into the.
Yeah, and Lexington, I lived on Virginia Road, and it was horrible. I mean, it used to take me, if I tried to get from Virginia Road to one of the medical places over on Baker Ave Extension, it would take me half an hour at rush hour. I think there still are problems in West Concord in the mornings. I know that.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
Yeah.
I think one of the maybe the biggest picture item too is that one of the challenges that we have is that what we are doing with transportation is not isolated to Concord, and we're part of a region.
Yes, and the other second thing you mentioned, which is what they've been calling cut-through traffic.
Right.
Yeah. I want to keep an open mind about that. I know people complain about it, but there's a different way of looking at it, which is, if the traffic is backed up on Lowell Road or some other road, and people start using side streets to get around it, they're relieving the congestion. Now, that may be offensive to the people on the road that they're driving on, but is it okay or not? I mean, it's what the roads are there for. They're public roads. So just to be a devil's advocate, it's just an interesting question about this cut-through traffic, about what purpose it serves and what problems it causes.
I have a couple things to add to this list. Also, I just wanted to clarify what the purpose of what we're trying to get at right now. Are we just trying to do sort of are these only items that are in Envision Concord, or is this?
No, this is what is so.
What do we have? What do we lack around town?
What are the perceptions? What are the realities? What are the problems? What are the good things?
Right. So one thing to add to this would be, in addition to the 2 commuter rail stations, we have the Yankee Line bus, which is a direct line into downtown Boston. And I would say you might want to tag on to that. It's quite underutilized. So a lack of knowledge about that service, or there's something wrong with that service that's being underutilized. Right. And then one other thing to add in terms of lack of something that we lack in Concord is connective connective routes between various places in town that allow for pedestrians and bicycles to move between them safely. You know, and cycling isn't called out on this list at all. So we have a beautiful the beautiful Bruce Freeman Rail Trail to add to things that we have, and something that we lack is not very many bicycle lanes or signage about sharing the road with bicycles around town.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good one. That was in fact mentioned in Envision Concord, and I didn't remember that one.
So I would add to Laura's comment that the two parts of Concord are disconnected for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Right. Okay. So to say it's difficult to get from some parts of Concord to other parts of Concord for
Right.
pedestrians and bicyclists.
Right. In particular, Concord Center to West Concord Village. They're severed by Route 2.
Right. Okay. Same signage and wayfinding just says signage and wayfinding. Should there be a problem statement there or a praise or what? I'm not sure.
I think there's a problem personally.
There isn't. Well, state. I'm not sure what it is. I'm one of those people who just knows his way around and doesn't read signs a lot. So
I think there's a lot of sign pollution personally. There's too many signs, and they're sometimes antiquated and difficult to see. And there is no wayfinding.
Yeah,
One of
that's
the
a very
issues,
interesting.
one of the
I don't know
issues
if
that we've had with wayfinding is that there's, it hasn't been done in a very collective way. And so certain organizations will put up a sign to get to their location from one direction, but not from another, or the national park will put up one and the cemetery will put up another one. So nothing's cohesive and it's difficult to find your way around. So the lack of wayfinding is, it's definitely
the issues
there.
So it's both a lack and inconsistency and an application.
Mhm.
Okay. Any others? Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, I don't want to get into this too deeply tonight, but one of the issues we're going to have to deal with eventually is that a lot of the complaints and the things that are stated as problems are perceptions. There's no data to support most of it. And it's going to be difficult, I think, for the town to make decisions about investments when you can't quantify what the problem is. Okay, so that's where I'm coming from on this slide. How do we measure our situation in progress? How might we quantify the current situation and the needs? How would we identify a population of interest? You know, we talked about certain populations we're trying to serve. How do we know if we're serving them or not serving them? How would we measure improvement? So maybe we get a baseline, but then what are we looking for an improvement? What's acceptable? How big a deal does it have to be? How do comparable towns do it? If we want to set a metric for something, if there's something we're trying to measure, for instance, take parking. It's a classic one, which is, well, you want more parking. How much more parking? How much do we have? There was a study done by the town. We'll deal with that some other time. But you know, what's the situation in other towns? What's the ratio of parking spaces to retail business establishments? You know, we just don't have any metrics to measure most of the things related to transportation. And as I said, it's going to be difficult to make investment decisions when we don't have numbers. When is a project worth the cost? And, you know, issues such as quality, safety, effectiveness, we need metrics for those ultimately. You know, is this a safe town to ride a bicycle in? I have no idea. Phil probably has some opinions, but I don't know. Do we have data, Phil?
We have survey data. So I guess my response to the question is that it's difficult to put numbers on some of these data points, but we do have survey data that provides us with some information. And we've had various surveys, both in connection with the Envision project and with the Complete Streets project and a Board of Health project that the Board of Health undertook 4 or 5 years ago, which give us some input about what people's perceptions are. It's true, perception is not the same as hard numbers. The other thing I did want to mention, and I sent this over to you, and I'll mention to the other members of the committee, the DPW and the BPW do have metrics with regard to pavement quality that they use. So there's a fairly elaborate protocol and body of information that maybe we can get access to, which details how the DPW tries to set priorities with respect to paving projects. I think that the DPW has recently rethought how they're going to undertake some of those projects, and that has resulted in a public process, which they're just getting started with, which has a meeting tomorrow. The gist of what I think they want to undertake is sort of quicker and dirtier, but just get it done type approach, as opposed to, you know, slower and more deliberate and more elaborate type undertakings with regard to road construction projects.
Yes, I spoke with Alan Cathcart today, and he is invited, if anyone's interested. The Public Works Commission is having a meeting on Wednesday at 4 o'clock, and they're going to be talking about capital investments in roads, road repair philosophy, all of that. If you want any background on that, if you can either Zoom into the meeting or watch the recording of it, that'll be available. And as Phil just mentioned, tomorrow at 4 o'clock, there's a roads program meeting about the plans for the current roads that are going to be worked on. Okay, now it's Erin's turn.
There we go. You guys hear me? It wouldn't let me click. So these are current projects that are either underway, are sort of being thought of, or on hold, or are already completed. Because obviously we've been in the midst of a pandemic, some of the projects that were being worked on were sort of put on the back burner indefinitely until things change or just needs changed. This is a very incomplete list. These were just things that were top of the mind and easy to find information for. I'm still working with planning, CPW, police, sustainability, a whole bunch of different people to try to get a more complete list together. But this was my incomplete list here. So some of the projects that are currently ongoing or on hold are Crosstown Connect. If you don't know what Crosstown Connect is, it's a partnership across the region. It's Acton, Concord, Carlisle, Littleton, Maynard, Sudbury, and Westford that have all come together to say that they want to look at regional planning as a region, as opposed to taking it on individually. So some of the things that were being talked about before were things like regional bus services and things like that, and trying to find ways to make for there to be other forms of transportation other than single-use occupant vehicles.
Currently Crosstown Connect also has actual vehicles in operation, but not in Concord, correct?
Correct. So Acton has a program that is, it was running, it's on hold right now because of the pandemic. And I believe that, not Stowe, Sudbury has one that is also, it's sort of like a call service where you can call and have a van come pick you up, similar to the COA's service, but it's anybody can call, and I think it's like $1 to get on or something like that. So they've come up with some different approaches, and Concord was on tap to to be a part of this all and to sort of regionalize a little bit more. But that got put on hold due to the pandemic. We also have Complete Streets projects, which are ongoing. We have the Sudbury Road crosswalk at 7 Star Lane, the Hubbard Streets and Stowe parking lots and Commonwealth Ave. Those are all ongoing, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on the status of all of those. In 2018, we adopted the Complete Streets policy here in town. And so we are able to, after undergoing and doing a prioritization plan, we're able to get state funding for Complete Streets. So that's an ongoing area that we can continue to grow in. We also have a couple of shared streets grants, which are ongoing right now. We both have one that is for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail crossing that put in those flashing beacons to alert cars that people are crossing. And then we're also putting in a couple of bike shares, one on the Bruce Freeman in West Concord, and one which will be at the visitor center. Those are both in progress and we're working to get those in place. The Shared Streets Grants is new during the pandemic. And we were able to get one in the, spring, summer, sometime around there. And so we are currently working on both of those. And the bike share is a pilot program to hopefully become a permanent program. The traffic cut-through study, which was already talked about a little bit, that is a completed study that was completed a couple of years ago that looked at specific routes to see how much cut-through traffic there was specifically coming off of areas like Monument Street, Main Street, places like that. The Cambridge Turnpike Improvement Project is another project that was took a lot of time and a lot of effort and has recently been completed. I'm sure you all have heard about it. And we also have the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, which is obviously still ongoing. That is another sort of regional project which crosses many different communities. And we're really excited about the prospects of having this, this really trail network that goes across so many different communities and is connecting these economic centers. So there's many more projects that are ongoing or have happened in the past couple of years. This is just sort of my my quick and complete list, but hopefully we will have something more complete soon. And if you have any projects that you think of that obviously this will be in.
As an on the drawing board one, the warrant article that Phil is proposing, you might put on here too, right? Which is a warrant article for the Reformatory Branch Trail improvements. So that's another possible project.
What I was going to say is if anybody has any additional projects that they think of later, feel free to email me. This list is not complete. I'll be filling it in as I go, as I get more information from different people, especially since I'm going to be looking at the regional efforts. You know, there's many groups that the planning division works with, the engineering works with. So we're going to be adding those to this as well.
Yeah.
I see a couple of hands. Laura?
Yeah. Do we have time in the agenda to talk about these topics a bit, just in terms of getting a little bit more information about them?
We'll have to do that for the next meeting, I think, to get in, if you want to get into depth.
Questions about the status of these things, because
you go ahead.
Complete Streets, for instance, first of all, I happen to know that the Sudbury Road crossing is more or less complete, since I live right near it. But I wanted to know, just get a little bit more information about Complete Streets, because I know that was a pretty comprehensive project where the whole community was surveyed and a very long list of projects were ranked and prioritized. And I don't know enough about the project to know, you know, was that funding for just the top 3 projects? Does that renew on an annual basis? Is the funding used up? Those are the kinds of progress updates that I would love to know, just in terms of like, how does that complete streets process move forward beyond these 3 projects that I believe were for 2021 and should be finished up long before the end of 2022, although I could be wrong about that. So do you have any more information about that, or could we do an update on that at a next meeting?
Yeah, I can give you a little bit of background from what I understand. I think this is right. So every year we can, Complete Streets is on a biannual basis. They have different rounds of funding that you can apply for, but you have to apply for funding each year. So you come forward with a project. So the town has that prioritization plan, and they say, you know, say we did projects 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to do 4, 5, and 6, or we can put forward different projects for funding and say, this is the project that we want to do. We really want to do project 5 this time because it's the most pressing because something changed, and they can apply for funding that way. I believe that on average, you get about half of the projects that get submitted to Complete Streets get some sort of funding. It's usually not all the funding that you really want. A lot of times you have to have matching funding. So it really depends on what the budget for CPW is as well. But it's reevaluated on an annual basis.
You said, was it biannual or annual? Because I heard both.
So there's 2 rounds of applications, I believe. Typically they have sort of like a round 1 and then a second round later in the year. But if you get one, you can't apply for the second one.
Right.
It's typically how it works.
And so, because I'm not sure if the applications happened in 2020 or 2021, but do you know when we'll be up for another round of funding?
I don't know. I think that they want you to use up and finish your project before you apply for more. I think that's the way they typically want to do it, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Great. So maybe on a future agenda, Nick, we can talk about this in more detail and get some of the more just like timeline oriented things for these projects, because I think that these are going to be really important.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, we could get something from engineering.
Yeah, if anyone sends anything in, Erin's going to be away starting the next couple of weeks. So make sure you copy me if it's related to the committee's work so that I know what you've sent to her. Otherwise, it'll just disappear for a while.
So I think it might be worth investigating how both CPW and the planning division allocate their resources with respect to seeking grants and state level aid. So, with respect to Complete Streets, that's a good example. It's not completely clear to me whether or not there's somebody in CPW or in planning whose job it is to monitor the status of the projects and then to think about, okay, here's the next time we're going to have an opportunity to apply for a grant. And it's along the same lines, it's not clear to me whether or not there's a staff function that seeks other grant opportunities. Now, so I know that as a kind of general proposition, Marcia Rasmussen is terrific at getting grants. But I'm not sure where her focus is and whether her focus is on transportation or other issues that are of concern to the planning division. I do know that, for example, sort of on a somewhat regular basis over the course of last fall, I would shoot grant opportunities over to the town manager's office and say to the former town manager, I've become aware of a safe routes to school grant that's available for the town, but you got to apply for it quickly. Here it is. You guys have to deal with it. And we should probably put on this list that the school department has accepted the Safe Routes to School program, and that makes the town eligible for money that is made available by MassDOT for communities that participate in that program. And that kind of, those grants are for relatively quick turnaround, but potentially high impact type projects like road signage, road striping, and other safety improvements, which are intended to promote walking and biking safety around town.
As for the grants, there's generally not one person who's applying to grants. It's when something comes up, usually you only have sometimes a couple of weeks to put something together. So it's usually whoever has some time or whoever has some knowledge in the field will help to put something together. I know I've helped put together a couple of grant applications, but there's no one person in any department.
So, maybe that's something that we could recommend to the select board, that, somebody in each of the staff divisions be, assigned that role, so that there would be like in planning and in CPD, there would be a specific role and assignment that person's job is to seek grants on an annual basis. Not, it's not their only job, but that person would be trained and would be responsible for doing that kind of work. Because I think the communities that are most successful in obtaining grants do have staff people who have that job. That's part of their job description.
Well, it sounds like finding out how other communities actually do it would be very valuable.
Yeah.
My sense is that there are so many possible grantors that it's very difficult to just hook up to one place and find out. I mean, it could be a foundation that's making grants. It could be the state. It could be the federal government. It could be almost any sort of organization. So I think
it's a real skill set to be.
Well, applying for the grants is a skill set. Finding the ones that are available.
Right, finding them is also a skill set. It's a different skill set than writing it, but it's also a clear skill set.
Well, maybe I don't know anything about grants and grant writing, but maybe there's someone. Maybe where we should have the one person is the one person who figures out what the grant sources are.
Yeah,
and then points the departments at them.
Nick, can I jump in real quick just to answer Laura's question? So for the Complete Streets program, Concord can get up to $400,000 in construction costs, and the application timeline for that is May 1st and October 1st. So all things considered, $400,000 just from being in this line of work, it's not as much as probably we would hope for something like this, but there is that opportunity for that funding.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, Michelle.
Nick, yeah, I was just going to suggest, because I think you captured, in this presentation, there's all the key pieces around, what are our objectives, our budget metrics, and maybe we almost need a section for resources, because I think the budgeting and grants is a big component. I think Phil reminded me of something that was in the 2030 plan, which was an actual, I think it was an actual sort of department, because there's not a function sort of within the town that is actually responsible for a lot of these ongoing transportation needs, I think, unless you guys want to correct me. So I think that's, if that's something that we should also be making recommendations on, if there should be sort of full-time staff and budget to fund that staff. I wonder if that's.
No, I think in a sense that's more an issue for finance. I mean, they should be someone. It seems to me someone in finance should be saying, "Hey, there's sources of money out there we're not taking advantage of." Right, the finance committee or someone. I mean, I can imagine ways of dealing with that, but I'm not sure that finding funding sources is our thing to do. That we have much to offer there, except to say, "Hey, there are ones out there." I mean, if someone can articulate something, I'm open to it. I don't, the staff, asked back to Phil's suggestion about each department doing it. The staffs are all heavily worked, they're overworked. Every time I talk to a department head, that's what I find out. And, giving them another thing to do means it's another thing that's going to be in their list of things they wish they could do.
Yeah, but I think what Michelle is saying is that maybe we recommend that the staff be supplemented with an additional staff person. Not that we give, we add to somebody's burden, but to, have the staff, have the town say, we think this is important. And so we're going to spend what X number of dollars, $100,000 annually, to fund a seat.
Okay, I had an inkling of an idea about this earlier today, which is I think we need to talk to someone like the Finance Committee to find out a little bit more about this issue about, there's money out there. How does the town get it? Does the Finance Committee have any role in saying, the town should be doing this more aggressively? I mean, they might be heard a lot more clearly than we would on this particular issue.
I'll say Mary
So-
Hartman's here.
Pardon? Say?
Mary Hartman's here. She just raised her hand.
Yeah.
Oh, Mary, hi.
Hi. I'm Mary Hartman. I am on the Finance Committee. So I can tell you that this year, when the town manager brought forward his budget request, he did include in there many incremental expenses that needed to either result in a property tax increase or needed to find offsets. And one of them was a transportation planner. So the town manager, the new town manager now, is still working on that budget. So what's happening right now is that there's conversations around hiring a transportation planner for many different reasons. And that is now going into the mix of how do we bring a budget to the select board that is reasonable. So that's the status where that is. So that's the mechanism, and that's if it doesn't get in this year, then I think a recommendation from this committee would make it more likely that it would be in next year.
Mary, what about this issue of grants, of grant opportunities that maybe the town is just missing out on a lot?
No, I don't think we are. And the Finance Committee really doesn't get involved with grants. We're really just looking at property tax as a revenue source to the town. But I do know, just by looking at what's happening in the town, I think we do an outstanding job of taking advantage of the grants that are available. But again, that's outside of the purview of the Finance Committee. We just look at it as we're really glad, because then we don't have to raise property taxes to cover all the services that we want.
Okay, thank you.
I will say that on a, just sort of very basic level, I know that we do have a lot of departments who do receive grant funding for various projects. And we're very fortunate that we do have people who can take, a couple of extra hours to apply for those, whereas there's some communities that we are very busy as a staff, but there are some communities who cannot find the extra couple of hours to apply for grants. So we are fortunate that we do have a lot of times the opportunity to apply for grants, and we are afforded those opportunities. And I'm sure that Terry would say something similar. But yeah, we're always looking for new grants. If you see something that you think that could apply to us, please send it our way. We're always looking for new opportunities. I know that, we always, if we see something through the MAPC or through a lot of sort of nonprofit organizations, will put forward grants and things like that. We'll apply to those.
Okay, Terry, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Let me clarify a few things. First of all, by far, the biggest grants that are going to be coming, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity with ARPA and the infrastructure bill. And it far eclipses any of these little grants like Crosstown Connect. So I really apologize about the short notice, but some of it has to do with the town manager transition. Well, we're finally getting organized enough to be able to have a forum on ARPA and infrastructure. We're getting $5.6 million, and we have half of that in the bank already, and we have no plan. So I would really like the Transportation Committee, I know it's very short notice, but if you want to work on grants, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to weigh in at that meeting on January 31st because there are other needs in town, like water mains, water treatment, fiber, et cetera, et cetera. So transportation should have a voice at that meeting for sure. And then the other big meeting coming up will be in March, when we can also talk again about priorities. I just want to say one more thing about the transportation planner. It is proposed in the budget. I don't know if it will be funded, but it's possible that the case could be made that this person would take in more in grants than we pay out in their salary. So the position might pay for itself. And that would be one way to sell it to the town.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Laura, do you have your hand up again, or just didn't bring it down?
We can move on. Terry's
Okay.
answer was fantastic. Thank you so much for
Okay.
that information, Terry.
Okay, so I think, so what this brings up is that I'm a little concerned that there's a lot of stuff we should be thinking about as projects or investments that we should be making that aren't on this list. And I don't know how to find out about them, right? I mean, I can go around bothering all of the department heads, and Erin's been doing that with all the time, with her time available. But I'm a little bit not sure about what opportunities we just may miss completely here. So that's all I want to say on that. If anyone has any ideas, go ahead, Terry.
Just very briefly, I've been looking for the last 10 minutes through my emails. Marcia wrote a really good 2-page memo in the last 6 months, and it outlined 18 different programs and what the status is, what happened with the grant. And I can't find that memo, but I know it was written in the last 6 months. And if Erin or Nick ask Marsh for that memo, we'll find it. One of the things, for example, that's missing is the Assabet River pedestrian bridge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'll contact you, Erin, unless you want to. I don't care. But you just have a few days till you're gone. So.
Yeah, I have a couple things that she sent over to me right before this meeting that were more regional. One of the things that she mentioned was the pedestrian bridge. It's obviously not regional, but another thing that popped into her head that she said was, connectivity, if not transportation, at least. So there's definitely some things like that will be added to this list. And anything that I gather over the next couple of days before I leave, I'll add to this list and I'll send that around as well.
Do you want to contact Marcia to see if you can find about this memo that she wrote that had 18 or whatever projects in it that Terry mentioned?
Yep, I have a meeting with her tomorrow anyway, so I'll mention that.
Great, beautiful, thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, identify a preliminary set of high priority projects and needs. So let's assume we get a little more information from Marcia and elsewhere, and we have a partial list. How do we decide? How do we, the Transportation Advisory Committee, come up with good advice? What are the criteria we're going to use? Well, one that's obvious to me is how well does it address one or more of the objectives that were back on the first slide? If it's sounds like a great idea, but it doesn't really meet any of those needs, it's just a neat idea. I mean, probably not too high on the list. What effect does it have on the current situation? Is someone proposing something that's, again, not going to make a big delta, a big improvement? And what's the cost, both startup cost, capital equipment, whatever, and ongoing operational cost. And unfortunately, the operational cost implications are often overlooked. So, these are some of the things that came to my mind in terms of what criteria we might use for making recommendations. If anyone on the committee has any added things they think should be added or modified, speak right up.
I have a question maybe about the process, and maybe this is on the next slide. I was just thinking about, I like how you laid this out, and I almost wonder, I feel like for each of the objectives, there are there are problems we need to solve within each of those objectives, right? Or sort of barriers. And I feel like there's some projects that we could identify, in the near term that we know would meet those objectives. And I feel like then there's also more information we need to get in order to figure out how to solve those problems. And so I guess the question is the right stage, do we sort of lay out it's almost, what additional information do we need to get, whether it's in the form of, studies or, your point about what can we quantify, I think was really smart, or are there even additional surveys we need to do to inform the projects that could either solve those problems or help evaluate how to prioritize. I mean, it's a cost benefit analysis, right? But it just seems like we might need a step where we need more information.
Well, I think it's a good point to go back to the objectives and see, well, what's missing? If we have objective X and none of the things that are going on right now are dealing with it, do we want to suggest something? And then how do we go about figuring out whether it's worthwhile and what impact it might have? That's a good way of doing it. Okay. Laura?
Go ahead.
If you want to finish your thought, that's fine.
Sorry, actually, maybe you should stop me before I sign myself up for. I was gonna say, because I think I was gonna say I'd be happy to either spend some time on that after the meeting, just to maybe lay them out for us. Or unfortunately, it looks like Kathleen couldn't join, but I think she was going to do some work on that too. So it could be worth checking in with her to see if she made progress against that. But
I'm sorry, who?
was it Kathleen? Was it?
Oh, okay.
I think.
Yeah. So let's see. We have to be a little careful how we do the dance of stuff after the meeting or
Right.
Work outside of the meetings. But we could talk a little bit today about some brainstorm ideas, just a little bit, see where we go. But that's not on the agenda, so we really shouldn't do that.
Right.
But I could give an example of something. And if someone wants to pick up on it and run with it and do a little study, that would be okay. Just let me know if you're doing that, that's all. And you can do it. It's obviously not a problem if you do it yourself. Start, and you can talk to me about it if you want any guidance or advice. But to go back to that, let's go back. I'm going to do a little bit of talking out of turn. Could you go back to the
Before we move on,
Laura, go ahead.
just to answer your question that you asked us as a group, the criteria for evaluating projects, there are two things that I would add to this. One is what's within our power. I think that that's an important point. There's going to be a lot of things that come up about MBTA, about, accessibility at the rail station was one that came up in the last meeting. And some things are going to be within the power of town government and some things are not. So that's one really important criteria to have out there, especially for the public perception of our process. I am going to be the squeaky wheel on climate here, but the town in 2017 set a commitment to an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions over 2008 levels. So I think that speed in accomplishing that goal is really important because we only have until 2050. And more recent science says that those emissions targets are not ambitious enough if we want to actually stop a catastrophe from happening. So I do think that we do need to keep that in our sights, is like how quickly can projects that make a meaningful impact on the way people get around town, like speed is important. I don't want us to get trapped in a common problem in town government of doing like 4 years of studies and then producing a beautiful report that doesn't move forward. So I do think that like getting some projects working as fast as possible is important.
I think that you're right on. Excellent point.
So Nick, I'd also like to chime in and say, I think it's important to take a look at other work that's been done. So the first thing that occurs to me is that as part of the Complete Streets process, a very elaborate priority list was created. So before we start reinventing the wheel in this process, I think it's a good idea. And unfortunately, there's no chat in this, right? In this particular version of Zoom. Can I share the screen for just a second? Is that possible? I don't know if I'm going to be able.
Okay with me if you want to do it, can do it. Aaron.
Yeah, but the point I wanted to try to make is, hold on one sec. Can I do that now, Aaron? Is that possible?
You should be able to.
All right, so see what happens. Can everybody see this? Is this now on the screen for everybody? I don't know. Oh,
Yes.
okay. All right, great. So what you're looking at here is just a section of the spreadsheet that was created in connection with the Complete Streets project. And you can see the Hubbard Street project mentioned there, and Seven Star and Garfield, et cetera. But at least as part of what we're going to discuss now, I think it would be useful to have this body of information available to everybody, just for reference purposes, so that you can see what other folks in a similar but not exactly the same process thought were the priorities in terms of road construction. It's not the whole transportation picture, but it's road construction. So, and some of this is, relatively low hanging fruit. We've discussed stuff about relatively low hanging fruit. So might be a good idea for everybody to have this, and I'll stop sharing, but.
Great, I'll get that from Alan's people, probably from Steve Dukin.
Yeah, and I have a PDF. I can just send it out to
Oh,
everybody.
that would be great. Thank you. Send it to the group.
Yeah.
It's also on the town's website for anybody who's looking for it.
Yeah, and that's where it all came from. It's from the town's website. So
I was looking at that same document in preparation for this meeting, and I just want to make sure we have the most updated version, because one of the Complete Streets projects actually got moved from the bottom of the list to the top of the list. So I just want to make sure that and that's not the way that it's prioritized on the one that's currently on the town website. So if we can make sure we've got the most recent copy, that would be great.
So yes, Laura, I do have the one that bumped up the 7 Star Lane, Garfield Lane project up towards close to the top. So I think that's the latest one.
Okay. Let's see, it's 8 o'clock. And that was the last slide. Let's see, Aaron, could you go back to the slide, the objective slide? This one, okay. So one of the things I think that's implicit in some of these objectives, especially the objectives related to sustainability and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, is that we have a system now where the government subsidizes everybody to buy multiple cars, 2.3 per family in Concord. And, the cars are typically single person occupancy, driving around doing errands and things. And it's a horrible economic investment. Cars are parked 95% of the time. So, we have that scenario right now, and you're not really going to achieve many goals as long as you have many of the goals we have, as long as you have people driving cars around like that. You need some sort of shared mobility. You need things like microtransit, which are like, maybe little buses that run around and pick people up and, along certain routes and take them where they're going. You need other innovative things like possibly delivery service for Concord businesses, so people don't have to, drive down to the Concord Center or West Concord to pick up their dry cleaning or whatever they're getting. It just seems there are a lot of things. There's a place we need to get to that's a very different place that we're in now, a different paradigm. And there's little I see that's been proposed in the past about programs or projects that are going to move us any significant way in that direction. And I think that's one of the things that we need to push for. So, I have some ideas for some. I'm going to put them out as part of this exercise between now and our next meeting, and I will send them around just for people to look at them and think about them. But, one of them, the one I just mentioned, which is, I don't understand why we can't have some sort of delivery service that allows local merchants to get things to people to avoid driving around so much. It just seems that it might be economically beneficial. Maybe even charge a little bit for it for the customer, or for a buck or something to deliver something, but it's a lot better than getting in the car when I'm busy at home. So, if anyone else has ideas like that of just totally different ways of approaching it, I think the bus idea, and, I've been taken to task rightly for mischaracterizing buses, I think. And the way I imagine buses is that, we have a bus service, there may be small vehicles, but, they don't stop necessarily at fixed locations. You know that if you're, especially in streets that don't have sidewalks, you can imagine that, you can call someplace and arrange for the vehicle to come by and pick you up and take you to the town center. And that there'd be other people along that route. If they knew the bus ran that route certain times of day or certain days of the week, they might be able to organize their errands, that way, or their appointments in town. I think it's called micro transit, that particular approach. And the regional planning people, they're having a workshop on it. I signed up for it. I think any of you can do it. What's it called? Erin, what's it called? The
MAPC.
Yeah, right. So anyway, if you want information about it, send it to me. I think the workshop is like the end of the month, the 26th or something. Anyway, I think those are things that I think we need to push for, because nobody else is pushing for them.
And if anybody's interested, if anybody's interested in sort of that idea of having a small regional transit where people are calling and using different vehicles and things like that, they're doing a pilot study out in the Berkshires, I believe, where they're using like COA vans in off hours or something like that. But they're using it as a regional transit. So people can call and get a ride that aren't within walking distance of public transportation. So it could be, I looked briefly at it, but it could be an interesting thing to sort of look at.
Have you got a link to it you could send out to us, or?
I can try to find it again, yeah.
Yeah, if you can. Yeah, that's interesting. One of the problems we have with things like this for Concord situation is the low population density. It's easier to do things like this in a city or denser population areas. Laura?
I wanted to highlight one thing that you had in your presentation. What populations are we serving and which populations are we going to target first, I think is a really important question for us at this stage, because I think that changing the culture of the working commuter is kind of hard. They've got a very busy day, working parents, they don't have a lot of flexibility in their schedule. The populations that we can change the fastest are students who kind of can't drive anyway, and I'm sure their parents don't actually want to drive them to and from school every day. Senior, I think that there's a lot to be done around the schools and thinking about our objectives around reduced parking needs around the schools and reduced congestion around the schools. So I think that we just need to be thinking strategically about which pieces of the car culture we can change first. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that.
That's an excellent one, in my opinion. I agree with it about the schools being an important one, because one of the things I discovered when I was working on this transportation stuff was that the whole school bus model is optimized for elementary school. The bus comes in the morning, it takes the kids to school, school ends, the kids go back home. When you get into middle school and especially high school, that isn't what the school day is like. People stay after school for activities. Then there are no buses to take them, or they take them to places that aren't where they want to go. My granddaughter lives in this house with me, and if she wants to get here way out at the end of Monument Street after school, the closest a bus will drop her is at Liberty Street. which is about 2.5 miles away. Right? So we have to go pick her up at the library. So, but that whole issue, the whole transportation system, in my opinion, for the schools is not optimal, especially for high school and middle school.
But I think,
by the way, excuse me, and part of the symptom you see is the complaints and demand for more parking at the high school.
yes, I was just, instead of using it as a criteria for coming up with new projects, I think that might be a really good framing for looking at the list that Phil showed us, looking at complete streets, some of the existing projects, how do they serve the needs of the populations who are most likely to use them first? Just in terms of trying to narrow our focus and come up with like a short list of projects to work on very quickly this year.
I'm taking notes. So good. Well, how do you get at that though? Which group is most likely to use it first?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking specifically about students, youth, like you look at this list, those who are unable to drive are certainly the first. So, what is our disabled community saying about access in the downtown areas and connectivity between the two downtown areas? What are our youth saying about how they can get to their after school activities? How, we did a transportation survey of high school, high school, I think it was the parents of the high school students pre-COVID about like what are the barriers to walking and biking to school? The connection points across Route 2 were one, the lack of bike lanes at the approach to the high school was one, just like lack of safe infrastructure, lack of street lighting, things that are very like infrastructure based, very like achievable, especially for folks who live within, 5 miles of the school. So looking at the complete streets list with that lens of like the high school has a parking problem. We have a mandate as this committee to reduce demand for parking that's very clearly laid out in Envision Concord. And so that's a big one. But then also for disabled and seniors, what are the transportation things on that list that, yeah. So just thinking about our captive audiences, people who can't drive are clearly the first people who need better infrastructure.
Okay.
It would seem that the student population is probably the best one to tackle first, given that they are all going to a common location. You don't have the issue with the elderly or disabled where there may be multiple locations at both ends of the spectrum. And the parking situation at the high school is something that can be controlled by the town by limiting that. But you see that, with an infrastructure that's already established with school buses and, schedules being somewhat similar on one end, at least, it still doesn't work. And we have to address those issues as to why, the need to drive to school is so compelling for so many people. But there are those problems like Nick with your granddaughter where, the nearest drop-off point is 2.5 miles. So that's something that we can really attack head on, I think, early on.
Okay. I don't know if we can do it by the 31st of January, but
no.
Good shot here. I'm just trying to think about how to do that. I guess the way this is going to have to work is that after this meeting, I'm going to look over my notes. I will talk to various members individually just to discuss some ideas, just to get some ideas out on the table and see if what we can come up with as a way of framing this so that we can do something meaningful for the select board by the 31st. And if you have any ideas, send them to me unsolicited, please. Or this is a solicitation. Send me your ideas.
That sounds good. I have some thoughts, but I realize we're probably running out of time, so I'm happy to send them.
That's okay.
Yeah. Before you get off this topic, Nick, one other idea that I wanted to throw out is because I'm sort of the evangelist for the Safe Routes to School program is that maybe reaching out to their staff for some ideas of, low-hanging fruit type projects might be helpful. I'll send you the staff person who is responsible for our region, and you can hook up with her. They have a mandate from MassDOT to provide technical assistance to the towns, and that might be useful for us.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Terry?
Yes, please be very mindful of the open meeting law, which was revised recently, that what you were suggesting, Nick, is really walking the line. There were two things you suggested. One was for everyone to send you their suggestions. That's a great idea. The part about you calling each member,
Oh, I didn't say that. I said call me.
well, okay, but you can't have what they call a serial conversation.
Right.
You can have everybody contact a staff person like Erin, or they can just send their ideas to you, but you
Okay.
can't respond. I know you know this, Nick. People who have been on town committees know it, but some people here are new on the town committee system. So I just
Well,
want.
you're right. What I was suggesting was very close to the line. So, and it would be easy to fall over the wrong side, I'm sure.
We don't want you. I'm right now answering a public records request for another thing. So, we want you guys to be free and clear to do your work.
Okay.
And, you don't need to solve the whole universe by the 31st or anything, but just some ideas that you have would be great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Terry,
Terry.
could I ask you a quick historical question? It's just and I was just thinking about ways to sort of organize our thoughts here is should we be basing, some of our recommendations, I guess, on, more directly on sort of what was in Envision Concord? Because I guess what I was sort of thinking is one way to approach this would be to capture, there were objectives and specific activities that were documented in Envision Concord. Would it be helpful for us to really kind of capture those, note the activities that were identified? This is a couple of years ago now, but then note, either this has already happened, check. This has not happened yet for whatever reason, like status, or no longer relevant, for example. And I'm just wondering if that would allow us, for anyone who, I guess, if this document is still sort of an anchor, does that give us then a framework for sort of summarizing like what the opportunities, what opportunities we want to pursue and what's already, sort of been accomplished. But if we walked away from that document, that's okay too. I was just curious about that.
Okay, a couple of thoughts. First of all, I really think Nick did a super job of organizing this meeting, and you guys are absolutely on the right track. And that's not so easy to do. Most new committees that I've been involved with are kind of floundering around for a while, trying to figure out what to do. And you guys are right on track. So great job. Envision Concord is a very good roadmap. You can absolutely do that. You might want to, though, note things that have changed because of the pandemic or whatever. So it's not a perfect document. It was really good at the time, but some things have changed. And finally, we did have a forum on Envision Concord in November. And the planning board and the CPW and all the other departments involved wrote up on a spreadsheet every single item they were responsible for and what the status is. So that's already been done. And it's on the website. I'm sure Erin can find it for you. And so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can look up every single one of those things. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does, yeah. And I wonder if it's just, maybe it is a matter of just lifting those and just making sure we haven't left anything off the list.
Right,
So,
and maybe some new priorities have emerged since then.
Yeah.
There are new ideas since then too. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Right, for sure.
Laura?
I actually have another clarifying question for Terry, just in terms of what are our goals ahead of the 31st? Like, what is something being decided at the 31st? Is that just a public forum on the way that these ARPA funds are being spent? Just so that we have an idea of what we need to accomplish between now.
Yeah, great question. I'm not sure we're going to decide anything. It's more of a forum, or middle between a forum and deciding, because we're way behind and we need to catch up and move quickly now. So I just don't want to see transportation issues lost. I want to just make sure the transportation is represented at that meeting.
But do you want proposals or concepts or something in between?
If you have proposals, that's great. Like some of the things are far enough along, like for example, this Crosstown Connect. It's not only on hold because of COVID, it's on hold because we don't have a vehicle. If we could buy a vehicle with the ARPA money or the infrastructure money, we could have drivers driving people to commuter rail tomorrow. That's like the only thing is we're ready to go, but we don't have a vehicle.
Well,
So,
it seems, yeah, good, okay.
but so you might have a specific proposal like that. Then there might be something else like reformatory branch. Well, you don't have a proposal yet right now, but you know that there's an issue there. So you have a whole mix of issues. Some are further along than others. And I'm sure you're not going to have proposals for all of them by the 31st, and that's fine.
Okay, okay, good, thank you. So here's a thought. It feels like we could get a lot more done by the 31st if I insanely asked you all to meet again next week so that we have a meeting on the 17th and the 24th. Now, that's a big ask. So the question is, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, whether or not you could do that.
Nick, the 17th is MLK Day, so
Oh,
we would need to do it another day.
I could do it the 18th, Tuesday. Laura? Maybe, not Dan.
No.
Phil? Phil could. So Michelle, Laura says she could, I could, that's three. We need a fourth. Where's Norman?
I'm
Norman,
a maybe. Depends. I have something else, potential hold on the calendar, but I could possibly move it.
okay, so we can, over the next couple of days, we would have to have Thursday for Monday, so it would be Thursday for Tuesday too. So we'd have to have an agenda posted by Thursday in order to do that. So if we can close on this by Wednesday, that would be comfortable. And I would try to figure out exactly what we're doing. But I think in the meanwhile, my first priority would be to, Aaron's going to talk with Marcia. I may need to talk with Marcia as well before that meeting on possible meeting on the 18th. So let's say we want to have a meeting on the 18th. People will contact me and Aaron, send us email in the next day or so by Wednesday morning at the latest. Let us know if you can do it. And we'll try to pull off one more meeting. All we need is 4 people for a quorum. Okay, questions, comments?
And what will the goal of that meeting be, just so we can be prepared for that?
Do more work than we can do in one meeting on the 24th.
Is
In
this
other
going
words,
to be like brainstorming, bring your ideas for the
Well,
high priority, like just so that we can prepare, so that we can be more productive?
yes.
at that meeting?
I'm hoping I can get some more information out of Marcia and possibly Alan Cathcart in terms of their priorities and their views on this, because I think that's important to know, given that they both have done things and are doing things in this space. So I'd like that input first, and then that could frame the meeting. So for instance, if Marcia knows of some things that we should be focusing on from work she's done, then maybe those should be given a high priority for us to look at. The same with Alan, for instance, on complete streets. So maybe the town funding some money to kick into the complete streets program would both accelerate work on complete streets. It might work into this business about making it safer to get to school, something like that. I'm just trying to find some points of connection between work that's underway, programs we may already be involved in, ideas that are on the table. Just try to blend those together into something that could be actionable, or at least that we could recommend to the select board. But I just think we need more time than just one more meeting to do it. Okay.
Agree.
And Nick, if you guys can have Marcia's 2-page memo and the Envision Concord spreadsheets distributed to everybody, I think you'll have a really productive meeting, because that work has been done. And now you'll have a really good list of stuff, and you'll be able to have a really good discussion.
Okay.
Just flagging one other source of really clear, like, actionable items. The Sustainable Concord document produced, like, they're literally like implementation blueprints for increasing the use of public transportation around town, including Crosstown Connect. And there's another one about, let's see, it's improve availability, accessibility, and connections between bicycling and walking paths and sidewalks. So those are they're just 2-page documents. They're not like super long, but they have, 4 to 5 implementation steps for each of them, and like out tracking metrics. Those are really helpful for those
Good.
two. Yeah.
So where do we find those, or do you want to send us links to them, or?
Yeah, I can send you the links to them.
Okay, great. Send them to me, and me and Aaron will send them out. Okay. Okay. Any other, any public comments? Who we got here? Mark Galis.
Hello, thank you. Excellent meeting, highly appreciated. A couple quick things. I really support the idea of the microtransit, also delivery service. With the serving people, another thing that's come up, Precinct 4 now has lost its centrally located Ripley School voting location. And everybody who could have walked like we to that have to go to the Hunt Gym, and we're probably not going to walk to the Hunt Gym. And there's some people who may not vote just because of that. So it has that aspect. I do think that with regard to the ARPA funds, it's a little short runway, but the idea of capitalizing some kind of microtransit or delivery service has, hits a lot of buttons, as Laura and other people were saying, about sustainability, low carbon, equal access, and helping businesses. There's a article on the town warrant to create an economic vitality revolving fund that takes input from the tours, but it could also take input from pay $1 to go from the train to the something, or to have your groceries delivered or something like that, and it hits economic vitality big time, I think. One other thing that's probably longer term and a little bit vaguer, but I agree with what Phil said, that there's a lot of signs, but they're very inconsistent and confusing. So with regard to the wayfaring, that could really lead to a lot of efficiencies. And a couple comments. One is, if there's a sign at a train station, it says that so many minutes to walk to this place this way, so many minutes to walk to there. But also a thought I had was, start with the most restrictive area of historic districts and historical commission, come up with some kind of signage, and then expand it out to other areas. The national park also is a restrictive one, but you could get a very consistent, potentially a lot of work signage system in the entire town that would save people going down the wrong road, or not getting where they want to go, or going where there's no parking. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Ned?
Yes, thank you. Ned Perry, 362 Bedford Street. Very interesting meeting, great discussion. Underlying a lot of your discussion is an issue of safety. And I would have you add safety to criteria. And I'm a little surprised that Chair of our Select Board didn't add to your list Junction Park. which I think she's referred to your committee as well as a couple other committees. But I would add Junction Park safety and the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail crossing of the MBTA line there as a transportation issue that I hope that your committee as well as other committees will look at. So I'd look at safety for criteria. Thank you very much.
Thank
Great
you, Ned.
meeting.
Thanks. Who else we got? Ellen Quackenbush.
Yeah, so I think that Mark Gallius has kind of said a lot. As a senior citizen who doesn't use Council on Aging busing, I would love to have the opportunity when I purchase things from vendors in West Concord, to check a box that says, please deliver to me and provide some sort of a window. I think people, would appreciate that opportunity to not have to drive, but also to kind of, allow merchants to provide one extra service to their constituents.
Yeah, last I knew, by the way, West Concord Pharmacy does deliver. At least,
I meant not one-on-one, but many to one. In other words, that if I had something from the dry cleaner, from Deborah's Natural Gourmet.
Oh, yes,
that it could be.
Pick up my dry cleaning on the way, please.
Yeah, exactly. Only to get away from what you've been saying about one car, one person. It would be, the delivery that's one-to-one. Also,
well, that's what makes me think it's possible is that some businesses do it, and man, they could probably lower their costs if they teamed up with another business or two.
And I love the idea of lowering local businesses' costs. Also, I would just respectfully ask that you not mix the projects together as much as I think it's wonderful to have a citizen's petition on your list, Bill's petition. That has not been vetted by the Trail Committee of the Select Board. So I think that should not be listed as a project until it's farther along in terms of vetting. I think it's not,
Yeah, we were trying to put things on there that are just ideas too, not just projects that are on the way.
Yeah, but it's got considerable controversy to it. So I think it's,
sure.
Be careful about that. That's all. Thank you. The meeting was wonderful.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to add before anybody jumps off, we need the names and addresses of any public comments.
Oh, yeah. Ellen, could you get back on? I don't think you gave yours.
Yeah, I did not. I'm sorry. Ellen Quackenbush, 206 Prairie Street.
And Ned, we got Ned announced his, and
I forgot. I forget again. Mark Galis, 62 Prescott Road. Thank you so much.
Those were all of our commenters, I believe. And well, Mary Hartman too. Mary, do we have yours? Are you there still?
I'm still here. It's 16 Concord Green.
Thank you. And that's it. Okay.
Ned, could you just remind me of your address again, please?
Ned,
I'm at 362 Bedford Street.
Okay, thank you.
I did give it before.
Yeah, I did. I just missed it. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Looks like that's it. I entertain a motion to adjourn unless someone else has other business.
Move to adjourn.
Any second?
I'll second.
Second. Okay. Voting. Laura,
Aye.
Dan,
Yes.
Phil,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. I think that's everyone who's still here.
And me.
Okay.
Aye.
Oh, did I get, sorry, Norm. Okay, I wish Zoom just put the committee people across the top consistently, but it doesn't. Okay, thank you, everyone. It was a very good meeting from my point of
Thank
view.
you.
I was very nervous going into it. You made it easy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got everyone organized. Thank you very much, Nick, and the whole
See
team.
you next week.
Thank you.
Aye.
Bye-bye.